Why should someone who's a Rick and Morty fan try this adventure? Like,
Oh, man.
what is appealing for a Rick and Morty fan to like delve into this box set?
I think there's something, when you watch the cartoon, you're in some degree you're a passive observer of the world. You're observing it and you're laughing at it, but there's a different thing where you actually get to play in the world as the characters. And in this game, where you're playing Morty playing a character. So you get to voice Morty and you get to act out how Morty would run his character through this adventure. So there's just something weird that happens through the magical power of D&D where you get to act out the characters in the cartoon the way you envision them. And there's just something really fun in that. When we did any kind of play testing of this product, it was really fun to kind of draw on all the knowledge that you get from watching the cartoon and seeing the characters and sort of getting to know them, and then you get to play through them, through role playing. It's pretty fun. So any big fan of the cartoon, I would totally recommend them having at it and enjoying another meta level of Rick and Morty.
Yeah, it's like a good way to like fill the time, right?
Yeah.
Between seasons.
Oh,
At
totally.
least you
yeah.
get like a little bit more Rick and Morty content, and
Yeah.
that content can just be you and your friends.
Yeah, and it's just as a ridiculous and bizarre and wild adventure as any Rick and Morty episode. And if you want, as a DM, you can break this up into maybe a couple sessions, and just it's like the unwritten episodes you never saw before. Everybody's going to have their experience, and they're all going to be different, and they're all going to be weird and bizarre. And if I was maybe on the Rick and Morty side of it, if they could get some of these adventures and then just make them into episodes, it would be hilarious. Yeah, it would be great.
What is the interconnection between Rick and Morty and D&D? Because there is something about the adventures in Rick and Morty. Maybe this is because of my own DM style when I'm running games, but they kind of feel like D&D adventures.
It was in one of the things that the episodes provided so much fodder for were they're always going on a quest, right? Like they're always going on some interdimensional quest, and so the call to adventure is always present, and the idea that weird gadgets are always involved, and Rick is always inventing something off the top of his head. So we tried to figure out like what's the D&D equivalent of that? What kind of weird gadgets and puzzles and items would be in this universe? What kinds of things would Rick put into a dungeon just to further his own agenda about being like this, I don't know, his sort of anarchist, nihilist way of life? How would a person like that write a D&D adventure in order to make themselves feel as superior as humanly possible, right? So there's a lot of that in this adventure.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. I know Richard Witters talks about this. We've had chats about it, where D&D is this really, it's like this, any property that has this party dynamic to it. Like The Simpsons, like Rick and Morty, like Star Wars. It's a group, and it's kind of like this family. They may not know it at the time, but they're kind of a family, and they may come from different parts of the world, or they be an actual family like Rick and Morty, and they may not all get along, but they figure things out. They get through life, and they get through the adventure of life together. And I think that's sort of why things like that port really well into D&D, because of the party dynamic. And so, every adventuring party is a bunch of misfits, but yet you are going through this adventure together, and through the adversity, you learn how to bond and learn how to communicate and learn how to get along and learn how to work together. And so I think that's why Rick and Morty is just a shoo-in for this, because it is this, this crazy, wild, imaginative, roller coaster ride through one adventure after another. And so, yeah, it was actually when we got going on it, it just flowed. It was one of those things that flowed. We all laughed really hard, and we had a blast making it. So, yeah, easy.
How is it versus? How is it versus? Is D&D
Well-
trying to kill Rick and Morty?
Never.
Okay.
We would never. I will speak on behalf of D&D.
Okay.
Never. You might remember that the comic book series where Rick and Morty and Dungeons and Dragons first came together.
Which is
in this
amazing.
Beautiful partnership that at first everybody thought, what? No, nobody would let these two brains come together. How could that be? And yet somehow it just slipped on through. And they're magical. It's magical together. They actually belong together quite well. But the comic book series was called Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons. So now that this is a TRPG, it's Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty. But what it really is that it's Rick's Dungeons and Dragons. It's the D&D that Rick thinks is how it should be played.
I did get a sneak peek at it.
Yes.
And, well, more than a sneak peek. And I do watch a ridiculous amount of Rick and Morty over and over and over again.
Good.
And
That explains a
it
lot about
is
you.
completely delightful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it is a wonderful adventure.
Yes.
And the thing that is even funnier to me is the rule book.
Oh, it's very, very good.
Because the rule book, it's like Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And if you've ever read that, just the commentary
Right.
by Rick on D&D
Yeah.
is so cutting and kind of cathartic.
Oh yeah, and he takes jabs at Wizards of the Coast as
Yeah.
well, and I'm so glad that we were able to keep those in, because there's money. There's a point where he calls us like money grubbing bastards a few times, and then there's a part where we're like if you want more information about this, check out the player's handbook. He's like, these wily sons of bitches are already going for the upsell. You gotta respect that hustle. It's so good. I think most of the rule book was written by Jim Sub, who is just a master at writing that Rick voice.
Yeah.
And so that's why that book resonates.
I asked you why this is a good adventure for Rick and Morty fans. Why is this a good adventure for D&D fans who maybe don't know Rick and Morty,
Oh
if
my
there
God.
are any?
Yeah, well, that would be a wild ride indeed. For you to come into it as a D&D fan and not having any context of what Rick and Morty is all about. I mean, other than you get to see Tori Little's art and sort of read crazy rule book. Yeah, that would be a bizarre ride. It would be like old schoolers who went on expedition to Barrier Peaks. It would be like that. It would just be like, what is this? Like, what is this place? This is, it's because we push the fantasy into the sci-fi realm of Rick and Morty, so it gets there are lots of sort of sci-fi elements to it. You're not just sort of on unicorns and flying on Pegasi and all that. You're in this weird realm that is science fiction-y and fantasy at the same time. So yeah, it would be bizarre. However, I always endeavor push your horizons, D&D fans. Go onward into a strange new realm, and it would. I think at the end of the day, people will laugh so hard that tears will flow down their faces.
How do you encourage Rick and Morty fans to learn D&D? Or to give this a try?
For Rick and Morty fans who want to or are hesitant on the fence about trying the Rick and Morty D&D product, you can never get enough Rick and Morty content, obviously. And it was so well vetted by Cartoon Network that I choose to believe that the stuff in this adventure is now approved and canonical. So, there's some stuff in there that you might want to, have in your back pocket about Rick and Morty trivia that I've completely invented. But the main thing is, I think that one of the most fun ways that I have ever expressed my love of something is to interact with it and to find it. So I always used to do Star Wars role playing and Harry Potter role playing and Wheel of Time role playing because I wanted to be in that world, right? Yeah. I wanted to feel what it was like. And so this is a really good way to slip into the identity of these favorite characters of yours and to play them, to go on an adventure with them and to see what happens, to see how your relationships with each other evolve, and to kind of become your own instance of the Smith family, of this version of humans that you've known and loved for so many years, and to make it yours. And I don't think there's anything better than that when it comes to a creative medium that you can't control. Obviously, we don't get to write the Rick and Morty episodes, thank goodness. But we can write our own D&D fun. We can have our own adventure and make it ours. And so it gives you this sense of a little piece of ownership of something that you love.